now that I'm in America and I get to, buy a hunting license for $32 or whatever it is, and I can hunt whatever I want, it's like I'm experiencing what my grandfather experienced when he landed in Mozambique, but I'm in Mississippi. He lived the heyday of African hunting. My father at the time was a young teenage boy. You name it, they hunted it. When I look at what's out there right now in the hunting industry, I think the storytelling aspect of who we are as hunters is lost. And I literally came out after being attacked by yellow jackets of that one forest experience. I said, guys, send me back to Africa. Give me a buffalo that I can see, that I can watch, an elephant that I can see coming. Don't give me the stuff that nests in the ground and comes and literally through Carhartt pants is trying to get his stinger into me. And then you got poison ivory everywhere that you can just spread.
Hate that stuff.
It's like, give me stuff I can see. Don't none of this invisible rubbish.
All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Bowmen podcast. I'm here with Robbie Kroger. How do you say it, Robbie?
Kroger, and I typically say Kroger like the supermarket. Where I'm from down in the southeast, we have Kroger supermarkets. And when I first came to the States, I was a poor PhD student, like dirt poor, right? I had to be a bouncer in a bar to make ends meet. But I was going home to Australia. My entire family lives in Australia now, and to give them Christmas presents, I went to the Kroger supermarket and I bought as much Kroger stuff as I could get. Kroger coffee, Kroger peanut butter. Look, they got a kick out of it, man. They loved it. They were like, this is the coolest stuff, but it was also the cheapest, and it's the only thing I could afford at the time.
Well, I like Kroger. Is there any kind of family?
I wish. Otherwise, if it was, we wouldn't, the project we're about to talk about, would be blowing and going.
Yeah, true. Well, we are at the Sheep Show in Reno, Nevada. And what's cool about any kind of show like this is you never know who you're going to meet.
Right.
And what kind of relationships you might spark. And I'm always like, there's a certain message and a certain idea about hunting that I want to promote that resonates with me, what hunting's about and what life is about. And now and then you especially you run into people that have similar ideas and similar values and so forth. And you're one of those people. I met you yesterday.
Yep.
For some reason I missed your podcast you did with Adam on the Journal of Mountain Hunting.
Absolutely
I probably
forgivable.
skipped over it because the last name was Kroger, and I was like, no, so I missed that. But we met yesterday, and Matt Comment, a mutual friend of ours, introduced us, and I learned a little bit about you, and I wanted to get to know you more on the podcast. So as I get to know Robbie Kroger today, so does my audience.
That's right.
It'll be cool. You started something called Blood Origins.
Yep.
And, I can read here from bloodorigins.com.
Yep.
But why don't you tell me a little bit about Blood Origins? Like, what is it? Where did it come from? What's the goal?
Yeah. So, really it's a simple project. In its conception, in how we do it, it's simple. It's a storytelling documentary project. It's a way to tell people stories. So at that juncture already, when I look at what's out there right now in the hunting industry, I think the storytelling aspect of who we are as hunters is lost. I don't think that there are a couple of people doing some great stuff. You're doing great stuff. Ronella's doing great stuff. Shockey's doing great stuff. But for the majority, the storytelling aspect of who we are as hunters and why we do what we do is lost. And so I wanted to capture that. I also wanted to capture in the project just essentially the heart of who we are. And I think that's lost also in that people don't recognize, in one of our latest episodes, I talk about if you had to ask that non-hunting mainstream American, describe a hunter. Not what's on the inside, but physically on the outside. What would they say? White, male, middle age, and then they may even talk about trophy shots, grip and grins, that kind of stuff, which is what they expect to see. It's what they're used to seeing.
Sometimes a beer and a quad, and
Right.
can go downhill from there.
Yeah. And so I was like, well, man, that's not us. That's not me. That's not you. There's so much. We're a little deeper than just that.
Right.
And so that's what we set out to do, is we set out to tell people stories in a very dramatic, emotional, intimate way. And the way that when you watch it and you see the way that we've captured people's thoughts and their expressions and whatnot, you know, I want to draw people in. I want them to be like, oh, gee, this guy's story is crazy.
I had Shane Mahoney on the podcast last summer, and he has a podcast called Conservation Matters, and in one of those episodes, and I wish I had the episode off the top of my head, but I don't. He does an interview. He speaks to a community of outdoor writers, and he addresses them, and he says, it feels as though we've lost our way when we talk about hunting. And it used to be in the old days, you know, that there was a hunting ethic that was discussed, that was brought out to the forefront. And we celebrated the animal, the species, the country, the experience, and that made up the writing. Yep. That made up the bulk of the outdoor community and what we're about.
Yeah.
And then later, it morphed into with TV and mass production and commoditization of hunting. It morphed into more of a celebration of, or just a chance to talk about the hunter.
Yep.
I did this, I did that.
Yep.
I'm amazing. I'm incredible. I'm such a stud, you know. And it became also a focus on kill shots. You know, this animal goes down, that one goes down. It's like a DVD of 25 kills, you know.
Yep.
Instead of a DVD of one kill over an hour period, and a discussion about all the things that go into it, like, let's say, a Donnie Vincent film, like Rivers Divide. Instead of it being a film like that, it turned into 25 kills in 25 minutes, and it boiled it down just to that one climactic moment.
Yep.
And he was saying that we're losing the hearts and minds of those people that are not hunters. And if we don't spend our time focusing on the other parts of the hunt and telling the deeper story behind it, people will continue to misunderstand us.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the message of self is, rampant, as you mentioned. And so you'll notice in the project, it's a unique project, and it's not about self. You don't see Robbie Kroger at all, except for the beginning, because it's setting the tone of who I am and my story. But it's all about everyone else's story. Everyone has a story, just to your point. And that story is either captured in what it means to invest in our kids, what it means to be that conservation steward on the landscape, what it means to go out every week and restore a piece of property such that then you are embracing the ethics, the aesthetics, the wonder of what that wildlife could be on that property. And you may harvest one or two animals, but you're not doing it for that. You're doing it more for that holistic journey of what it really means to you. And so that's it, really. The everyone, and that's our tagline, everyone has a story. Yours is unique to you, mine is unique to me. But there's a common thread between you and me, and I only met you yesterday. But already there's this thread of, what we want to represent.
I watched your story last night.
Okay.
Episode 1. Yeah. Blood Origins.
Yeah.
And it's really cinematic. It's very dramatic. The way that it's filmed and presented is very deep and dramatic. And then I watched a couple other ones, and they all have that feel to it. And I think that when you're talking about hunting and you're talking about history and your life and blood origins, to me it is a you're taking animals' lives so that you can live. And to me it's something that we often, that in our echo chamber, we're so used to it. It's so commonplace because we do it every year, and we understand the circle of life, that we take for granted how heavy a topic it can be.
Right.
Where the non-hunter looks at it and sees some reverence there and is like, oh, I didn't know hunters were this deep, or that they thought about these things, that they even considered these topics.
If you had to ask me, Robbie, you built this project for who? I didn't build this project for the hunting audience. I built the project for the non-hunting mainstream. To reach across the aisle and say just what you just said. This is who we are. And so I had to make a decision about, we have fun whilst we hunt. People cut up, we laugh.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that's captured already. People, there's a lot of that stuff out there. But it's the drama, that message of what it means to me to make sure that my kids have the opportunities that I wasn't afforded growing up. That's important to me, and it needs to be told that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I say this often on this show. I think if hunters focused on making content, aimed it toward, or had a vision for it that pointed at the non-hunter. If you built your content for the non-hunter, then you kill two birds with one stone, because it very much appeals to the hunter.
Yep.
But it is also suitable for that non-hunter. And Donnie Vincent was on the podcast last week or so, and he said, I'll take you one step further. Don't just hunt. Don't just make content for the non-hunter. Just hunt with pure intentions. Just do what you do because you care about conservation. Do what you do because you respect life. Do what you do because you're passionate about do it for the right reasons, and then the content will follow.
Right.
In a lot of ways. What we share will follow suit. And I thought that was a very insightful comment that he made.
No, you can't disagree with him, the way that he shoots his, and the decisions that he makes about what he's going to do and how he's going to do it, is reflected in the content that he puts out there.
It's very easy, I think, to share a kill shot, but without, I think it's and believe me, I mean, I get sucked right into all that kind of stuff. But I also feel like with proper context around it, it has so much more meaning. And so done well, we make a case for both. I mean, it's like I said, it's good for the future of hunting. And make no mistake about it, we're in danger of losing hunting opportunities and privileges. And if we do that, if we go down that road, I think we're in danger then of losing wildlife.
Yeah, the Fish and Wildlife Census came out, we're 20% down since 2011 in terms of our hunter numbers. And the pay for itself North American wildlife model of essentially hunters paying to restore the resource that they are then reliant on. That's just a slow spiral that has begun already. And the state agencies are already feeling it, from a budget crunch.
Right. So tell me, let's hear your story.
Yeah.
What's your blood origins story?
So, I was actually sort of a mixed bag. I was born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Moved to South Africa when I was 3 or 4 years old. My dad was a businessman. He was raised in Mozambique to a father. His name is Leo Kroger. Leo was born in 1912 on the Siberian plain, Khabarovsk, in Russia. He was born to a Russian mother and a German father. The German father had family in Hamburg, died when he was 1. And so he was pretty much raised in Siberia, northern China. There's stories of him and her buddy making guns because there was no guns available. You can think of the time, right?
Yeah.
And Russian soldiers coming by after they had fired this rudimentary double-barreled thing into the fence, and he peered over, and lo and behold, 2 10-year-old boys with this like gun that they had made. That was sort of the start of who he was in terms of his blood origins. And he just, when you talk and you think about old school Africa, old school guys, right? Mm-hmm. This is the guy. Like, he lived, I just wrote a story for Pheasants Forever where the guy hunted pheasants in Tibet and northwestern China. There hasn't been a story written about pheasant hunting in Tibet and northwestern China. He did it, and he did it with a Novotny drilling. 3 barrels, 2 12 gauges on the top, and a 10 millimeter rifle on the bottom. And I don't have that gun today because he lent it to a friend who got accosted by Chinese bandits, and the guy came home with a bullet buried in his arm, and he didn't come home with the drilling because the bandits took it from him. Moved to Germany. Met my grandmother in a shooting competition. My grandmother was the daughter of one of the first foresters of the Sachsenwald in Germany. So that's I call it the sort of conservation restoration side of me. That's what I do as a day job. And he was the original forester of these woods. He was the conservationist of the woods, and he was the hunter of the woods. He had to provide meat for the prince's family that owned the forest. Mm-hmm. And so she was a crack shot. They met at a shooting competition, and she beat everyone.
Really?
Guys, girls, she beat everyone.
A woman after his own heart.
That's right. And he was like, I've got to meet this woman.
Yeah.
They met, had literally 2 weeks. He went back across to China in the Polish Accord during the World War where they opened the borders again. She jumped on the Trans-Siberian Railway. 11 days on a train to meet this guy that she had met 4 years ago. They got married. My father and aunt were born in northern China. And then they moved back to Germany, to England, and then he put the entire family on a boat in 1954 and moved them to then Portuguese East Africa, Mozambique. And then he lived the heyday of African hunting from 1954 to 1974. My father at the time was a young teenage boy, and you could imagine being a teenage boy being taken into the hinterland to these camps that they would spend 3 weeks, 4 weeks at a time hunting. You name it, they hunted it.
Yeah.
And the only thing he didn't hunt was lion, because that was his namesake. His name's Leo Kroger. Even if he had clients and they wanted to kill a lion, he said, no, you go to another PH. I don't kill lions.
And what do you mean namesake?
So his first name's Leo. So essentially lion in Latin. And so he's like, I'm not going to kill my namesake. So it was just a thing that he had. He never killed a lion. He killed everything else.
Can't go there, though.
No. And he wouldn't even let his clients, real rich American clients.
Right.
And he was like, nah, you go over there. But that was just the kind of guy he was. I can see him doing that. Mm-hmm. He would have dinner parties in Mozambique with the American ambassador, the Spanish ambassador. They'd play bridge and whatnot. They'd have dinner. And when he was ready to go to bed, he'd get up, he'd wind the clock and go to bed. He didn't care. You either stay here or you get out of my house. That's the kind of guy he was. And so in 1974, the revolution hit in Mozambique. All guns were taken away. Again, sort of reminiscing back to the 30s or 20s when, different occupations were occurring in northern China, and the Russians and the Japanese were coming in and taking guns. And so he literally got all these guns taken away. He snuck 2 guns out of Mozambique into South Africa. A side-by-side Davidson and a .270 Seiko. That was his playing game. And I got the .270 into the States legally. But I was born in 1978, and I didn't have that.
That was about 4 years after he stopped hunting.
4 years after revolution occurred.
Okay.
He would have kept hunting, but we were born, and then we moved back to South Africa. And South Africa, there is no public grounds to hunt. And I lived in Johannesburg, 8.5 million people, megalopolis area. So there's if you lived out in the countryside, sure, I think there would be opportunities to hunt, but there are no public grounds. There's no public licenses.
Right.
Guns are very hard to come by, even more so today. And so my story was I literally just had the stories.
Mm-hmm.
I had the trophies on the wall. And
so you're born in 1978. Your grandfather is how old at this time? 1912?
He is in his 70s, late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
And we were sort of the when you watch the project, that we use this term called "it's in the blood."
Mm-hmm.
When I was 16 years old, my grandfather said, when I was 14, he said, "When you're 16, I'm going to pay for a trip for you. Wherever you want to go, we're going to go together, me and you." And what I had to do was, every day at the newspaper, there was a bridge solution, the card game bridge. And he wanted me to cut that bridge solution out, and I did it every day for 2 years.
You lost me. Say that again?
A bridge solution. So in the newspaper in South Africa, you would have, the crosswords and whatnot, but there'd be a solution. Like, this is I've never played the game bridge, but in the game, there's ways to beat an opponent. If you see this set of cards or this set of cards, you can do this.
Okay.
Well, every day in the newspaper in South Africa, we got the newspaper, that solution would be there, and I had to cut it out and stick it in an envelope. And then I'd send it to Mozambique once a month.
Mm-hmm.
Did that for 2 years to get my trip. And just before thinking...
And you sent it to your grandfather?
In Mozambique.
So you took this thing out of the newspaper, like a crossword puzzle kind of thing.
Yep.
Put it in an envelope and mailed it to him every day?
Every month. I would collect 30 of them.
30 of them, and then mail at the end of the month.
All 30 to him. Because he'd play bridge with the American ambassadors every Thursday night in Mozambique. He wanted to be the legit bridge player.
Okay.
This is the kind of guy, man. I'm telling you what, it's like hard to explain.
But back
this
in
character.
What's funny is back in those days, there's just no digital presence.
No, nothing.
Zero. People forget.
Zero.
Yeah. So you're mailing him these things, and you're 16?
Yeah, 14, 15, coming on 16.
Okay.
And he had a VHS. I don't know if you probably have never watched it. There's a VHS tape, and the title of the tape is In the Blood. It was Teddy Roosevelt IV. He was 16 years old. He went to Tanzania. He had the double side-by-side, I think 600 nitro, to kill a buffalo, just like Teddy Roosevelt had done. And it's incredible because it's all about essentially what's in your blood.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched it.
When was this film produced?
So it's probably early 80s.
Okay.
Late 80s.
Okay.
I haven't found a DVD for it. I can only find the VHS tape.
All right.
And I told him about it, and I said, "Man, I'm really interested in hunting." And he said, "What?" And I don't know why, but up until that point, there was no talk of hunting. There was no tell me about the stories. Tell me about what you used to do with Bob. It was his hunting buddy. But this was back in the day when you had that buddy.
Yeah.
Right. That if I'm going hunting, Bob's going hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And that never came up. I guess it was just where we lived and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so he wrote me this letter.
And this is to your grandpa.
Yeah. So he wrote a letter to me, typewritten on that old rice paper.
Yep.
And I've still got it today. And that's what's in that first episode, is that in that first 3 lines, it says, I was quite astounded that you came to me and said you wanted to hunt. It must be in the blood.
Mm-hmm.
And I've still got it today. And so that never materialized. We never did that hunt. We went to the Okavango swamps, and it's the Lord's fingerprints on everything, because we went to the Okavango swamps, which is the wilderness of wildernesses in Africa. Mm-hmm. It's a swamp that ends in a desert. And that's where I fell in love with swamps, fell in love with wetlands. And that's what I'm today. That's my career.
Yeah.
I'm a wetland ecologist, and that's my restoration focus is how I put those features into landscapes. But now that I'm in America and I get to, buy a hunting license for $32 or whatever it is, and I can hunt whatever I want, whenever it's obviously in season. I have 2 young boys now that can experience all of that. Essentially, as I said in my episode, it's like I'm experiencing what my grandfather experienced when he landed in Mozambique, but I'm in Mississippi.
That's an interesting look at it because, he's in Africa, and that time he's like, the world is his oyster. The world is his oyster. And really, I've heard Stephen Ranella mention the topic of, the good old days being gone. He's like, no, the good old days are now. Like right now in the United States, these are the good old days. And here you are, much like your grandfather in Africa, only you're not really hunting animals that will kill you as readily as there.
Well, this is what's funny, right? The first year or two that I was in the States, we were doing some sort of forest work and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I literally came out after being attacked by yellow jackets of that one forest experience. I said, guys, send me back to Africa. Give me a buffalo that I can see, that I can watch, an elephant that I can see coming. Don't give me the stuff that nests in the ground and comes and literally through Carhartt pants is trying to like get his stinger into me. And then you got poison ivory everywhere that you can just spread.
Hate that stuff.
It's like, give me stuff I can see. Don't none of this invisible rubbish. You know?
You got a point there.
But you're right. Coming back, you know, I don't think, you know, you hear me say, I see Mississippi and not just Mississippi, but all of the things that are available to us Americans as what my grandfather experienced in Mozambique because of the perspective that I bring. Because I never had it.
Yeah.
I never had it growing up. I never had it as a teenager when everyone here in the States is running around, you know, with their buddies, duck hunting and whatnot.
So when did you go on your first hunt?
So I went on my first hunt in about 2000. Well, I hunted in South Africa doves and pigeons twice actually, with my grandfather and my father. And that was it. Those are the only two, you know, and that was nuisance.
And by then, your grandfather's old.
Oh, yeah, 85. But he's old, but when he's 86, he flew to Siberia to try and fly fish for Timon. Like, it's in these books. It's in the stories. This is the kind of guy he was. Right. He flew into Russia. Oh, the helicopter's not here. So what does he do? He just walks down to the local fishing village. Oh, what are you catching? All right, hold on. He goes to the store, buys 6 bottles of vodka and sits with the fishermen and gets, you know, flying drunk. Helicopter finally gets him, drops him off. Well, the helicopter doesn't pick him up. This is an 86-year-old man in the backyards of Siberia in a cabin with 2 Russians. And he's like, 14 days, no problems. I'm telling you, this man was, you know, when he died of leukemia, when he was having his first blood transfusion, I remember in 2004, going back to South Africa and seeing him in the hospital room. And the man was smoking in a hospital room, right? And the nurses were like, we can't do anything. He says, look, I've been smoking since I was 12 years old. Nothing lives. No virus, no cough lives in this stuff that's inside me.
Right.
And his little fridge in the hospital room had gin and vodka and tonic. And
how old was he at this point?
92, 93. Survived. Again, I'll digress with another story. So, revolution hit, all guns taken away. In the 2000s, he had known enough people, and in Africa, it's all about who you can bribe and who you can grease, and found the right person who knew the right person to say, I want a gun back. Mm-hmm. Everything's calmed down, and the guy was like, okay. And they rolled them up into this big white metal warehouse, rusted old corrugated door, flung the corrugated door open. You're talking about a 20-foot warehouse, steel warehouse. And my grandfather said it was floor-to-ceiling guns. And the guy said, pick one shotgun. And so he walked and he found the gun that was so lovingly wrapped in Hessian and oil and whatnot. That owner had obviously thought he was going to get his gun back one day. And he goes, see you later. Slipped it in the Land Rover, drove off. He took the house guy that worked with him in Mozambique, and he said, we're going to go to the duck hole that we used to duck hunt before revolution. So out they went, thinking that that's going to be probably one of the species that hasn't been eaten out of the landscape. Mm-hmm. So they go into this hole early in the morning, you know, sloshing. And again, this is an 88, 89-year-old man working his way through a swamp. They've got those old metal chairs that they're going to sit up next to the swamp. The house guy's got the gun. They sit down. And according to the houseboy, he said, we didn't see a duck. He goes, we could hardly see the water because of how thick the mosquitoes were. Not 1 month later, old man goes down with malaria. because of that duck hunt.
Yep.
And he survives it. Oldest guy to ever survive that kind of malaria. Again, the type of guy that this was, right? Old school.
So he writes a book, and you find this book. You had your own copy.
That's right.
He wrote it in 1970.
Yeah, I don't know when it's published. Let's have a look. I think
So
it was
the
published
book
in
is
the
called
80s.
My Last Kambaku.
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 That's right.
Kambaku. Which it means elephant?
It means elephant. This was published in 1996.
Okay, so 1996. So he wrote this book probably in his 70s?
It is a collection of short stories from literally the day he was born all the way through northern China, Mozambique. There's stories about pheasants, buffalo, taking Navy sailors that had sailed into the port of Lorenzo Marques, duck hunting. When that return trip that night, they came across hippos in the river, turned the boat over. So Kambaku, coming back to your question, Kambaku in the Swana, which is the local African language of Mozambique, means elephant. His last elephant. So the book is all about the last elephant that he shot.
So this book is so it looks like these hunts span from, he has some from 1931
Yep.
all the way to 1995.
Yeah.
That's a long life of hunting.
Yeah. And all over the world.
And what prompted him to write this book?
He was just a storyteller. That's who he was.
That also seems like it's in the blood too.
Yeah. And that's, again, it's this threaded thing, right?
These photos in here are just, man, they take you back.
Yep.
Leo in 1966, these elephant tusks in camp.
Yep.
I mean, floating
Yeah, so
these rivers.
The famous guy in Africa that everybody probably knows is a guy called Harry Manners. He wrote a book, Kambaku. Same Kambaku, the book, still available in Safari Press. Harry and my grandfather hunted all the time together.
Man, it's unreal. It's another time. You know, really is another time. But his hunts span other people's lifetimes. So he decides to write the book just because he wants to share his stories.
Yeah.
Leave something behind, a legacy of some kind. So I'm surprised that, and so he did this in the 90s then.
When he first contacted, 96, yeah.
And so he published it then. So by then you had expressed your interest in hunting.
Yeah.
Did he ever talk to you about this book?
He didn't talk to me about the book at all. But if you took the book that I have that he inscribed in, he drew a bunch of elephants on it. And he said the message was something along the lines of, this book is to you, Robbie. The future, and again, just sort of his wherewithal to understand sort of my heart a little bit at that point. He says, to Robbie, a future conservationist, notwithstanding all the wanton slaughter that your grandfather did. And it was sort of like poignant to who I am today.
It's pretty deep.
I think that he recognized that all of the elephants that he had shot, even though all of that elephant meat was given to the community literally would knock it down. And I think he was at a point where he recognized that I wasn't experiencing the opportunities that he had. And he couched it in a way that he said, look, you know, you're the future. You're going to be you're going to be who you are and what you want to do. You're the conservationist that is going to help undo what I have done.
I heard Manila speak at it was a backcountry hunters and anglers rendezvous in Montana. And I heard him get up there and speak, and he talked about growing up as a kid, hunting, doing things outdoors, and taking from the landscape and taking wildlife. And at the time, it just felt like it was just what you did. It was finite.
That's right.
Or infinite. I mean, there's just all these opportunities, and you just didn't think about conservation or the animals and too much. He was out there being wild and free on the landscape and exploring, hunting, eating, you know. And later, as he's gotten older, then he realized that there was a part of him that felt like I mean, it was an age thing, but I felt a sense of the need to give back, to repay for all that he's taken.
Sure.
And I think that's a natural progression for hunters, especially
Absolutely.
I think if you grow up with it from a childhood perspective, because I took a lot of it for granted, and giving back wasn't really something I even thought about at the time.
Well, have you seen that progression in you?
Absolutely.
See, it's the same with me, even though I didn't start young. When I first got to this country, I was the typical redneck Mississippi hunter. But I'm a completely different hunter today. And that's only a span of 10 years.
That's why I said earlier that if hunting goes, I feel like wildlife goes with it.
Absolutely.
Because there's something about hunting and taking animals and being in the wilderness that propels you to protect it,
mm-hmm.
to make effort to keep it there for those future generations. Like Theodore Roosevelt says about, we need to preserve these animals for the people that are in the womb of time. Mm-hmm. It's not just for us now, it's for down the road.
Yeah, for my kids, grandkids,
So your grandfather recognized that it wasn't what it was, that there had been change. Too much had been taken mm-hmm. and lost. Mm-hmm. So how does that make you feel about where you are now?
No, I think it's steered, if not necessarily the word steered it, but I think that he knew all along that's where I was going in terms of my career and whatnot. And I think that it's just it's the landscape that I live in today. It's the fact that I have two small boys that's it, right? Is investing in those boys, those opportunities that, people, I don't want to say everyone takes for granted, but people take for granted here, right? It's just mm-hmm. being able to go and, hunt and trap and be outside and just be outside without fear of safety, of, the things that people don't typically think about in this country. It's to me, I'm struggling with the words because it's that important to me. And I want my boys at 18 to turn around to me and say, man, thank you, but I'm not a hunter. I tried, no problems. And then I'm like, I'm good. I'm good. But I don't want them to turn around at 18 and go, Dad, why didn't you? And why don't you just do this or take us this or do that?
I feel the same way, like with my kids. We live in such a technologically advanced world. We got internet and constant bombardment of social media and all that kind of stuff. But then there's just something like in our blood that is about humanity and where we've come from, mm-hmm. and a connection to nature that we've, as a species, I guess, as a group, we've lost in so many ways. And I feel like hunters sort of do their best to actually put away the cell phone, put away the connections, cut themselves off from the modern world, and immerse themselves in nature in a way that's deeper than most people. People go on a hike, or they go on a mountain bike thing, or they go even backpacking or camping. Shane Mahoney describes it well. It's not the same as hunting, because when you go out and you hunt, the scent on the air means more. The direction of the wind means more. The imprint in the mud means more. Your senses are turned on in a way that they're not when you're just on a walkabout.
Yeah, your sensory perceptions, you're pretty much utilizing everything that, you need to embrace: the sight, the smell, the touch, the feel.
And when you slip into that predator mode that's in your DNA, mm-hmm. there's something that switches on inside you that's just, I think, backed up by thousands upon thousands of years of evolution, mm-hmm. and what makes us human. And to turn that off completely in the modern world we're in today, I think gives us a serious disconnection to the natural world, and a warped, strange idea of the planet and life.
Yeah, I think you brought up a point earlier in that I think for a while, maybe the tide has stebbed a little bit, and maybe it's, we talked a little bit about it yesterday, the tide is shifting, is changing, in that I think the message of, hunting and conservation, a lot of people, again, non-hunting mainstream, thinks that those are sort of opposing paradigms. That really, I think in the last year, Cameron Haynes has done a good job of it. Renella's done a good job of it. Shane Mahoney's doing great. These are the guys in our field that they're not opposing paradigms. One goes with the other. And, the whole Cecil the Lion, debacle. Actually now, if you look at all the things coming out of South Africa or Africa, the examples of how hunting is paying for X, Y, Z, sewer, water, electricity, families, jobs, all of those stories, all of those examples are coming to bear now. All coming to light.
Yeah.
And I think that is part of that tide turning.
I think I've heard Shane Mahoney speak multiple times in the last few years to say that he feels as though he has more hope about the future than he's had in the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
Because of the shift, because of all the new people coming into hunting and because of the how mainstream is embracing it, due to a lot of shows like Meat Eater and things like that.
And the locavore movement.
Yeah. It's powerful. So, this book right here, just selfishly curious about, my last Kambaku. Is it possible for you to get this made into an ebook so that anybody can go on to Amazon and get it? Because publishing a book can be an expensive endeavor.
Well, it was released. It was a very limited release. I think they only released 1,000 copies. And when I found this,
that's what it says in the beginning.
Yeah, when I found it, he was like, "Yeah, we haven't seen one of these come across our bookshelf in 3 years."
And this edition looks beautiful.
Yeah,
it's like clean.
Yeah,
I very much would like to read this book. I'm curious if it can be done, because your story, your grandfather's story, sounds very compelling.
Well, I've got my copy, so why don't I leave that copy with you? You read it and then post it back to me.
All right.
Sound like a plan?
Yes.
Good, man.
It does.
You'll enjoy it. It's when you read, you'll just, there's stories in there that you're like, what?
I just did a podcast with my grandfather. He's almost 90, and I put it on Gritty Bowmen a couple months back, and I think there are a number. I can look at the number of downloads that the show has received, and it's not super. It's good. It's just not like some.
Yeah.
It's not like some. And I think it's because people look at it and they're like, "Oh man, an old guy," talking about hunting.
Yeah.
Or they listen to the first few minutes of it and they're expecting it to be about hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really more about life.
Mm-hmm.
But we do talk some about hunting and what hunting meant for him and what it was like, and just kind of what those old days were like. But one thing that comes out of that show, and somewhat like what you're describing with your grandfather, is men and women both were resilient back then. They did things that we just don't struggle with today.
Mm-hmm.
They dealt with trials and hardships that we just are foreign to in modern society. Mm-hmm. From lack of electricity and water to, actually wondering where food's going to come from.
That's it.
To, coming down with something that modern science can't fix back then. And then down to just, just life was different. And it bred a person that was tough, so tough, so determined. And I love to go back in time like that and hear from people who did crazy things, and it was just part of every day.
Yeah,
he becomes a pilot and he's just flying around places. We don't do that today.
Yeah,
exploring country where the Navajo Indians are hanging out, but there's nobody else there in country that hasn't really been exploited.
Mm-hmm.
It's just different, and it gives you an appreciation, I think, for what we have today, but also a glimpse of what we're missing.
Well, I think that's the key of, dare I say that's the key to the project, is what are we missing?
Mm-hmm.
And so let's capture what we're missing. So I'll give you an example of what's coming. This is the best. I'm more excited about this than like the name knowns that I know I've got coming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in 1943, there was austerity measures are in place. World War II is occurring. And there's a railroad line that runs through Aberdeen, South Dakota, sending soldiers to war. Austerity measures mean rations on shotgun shells, rations on food, rations on gasoline. Mm-hmm. The Aberdeen community banded together, put together a canteen where they fed the soldiers every day. 500, 800 soldiers would come into town every day on the railroad line. They would feed them and then ship them off. Well, the hunters of the community decided, well, we can help too. Again, austerity measures in place. Mm-hmm. They went out and hunted pheasants
mm-hmm.
and brought the pheasants back, and they created pheasant sandwiches. And they got known for pheasant sandwiches. This was what they were known for. And the stories and everything. The coolest thing about the canteen, run by women. Completely run by women. They are all alive today. Yes, exactly. That was my reaction. 5 women are still alive today. So we're going to go to Aberdeen, South Dakota in April. They don't like to get out in the winter. We're going to Aberdeen, South Dakota in April. And we're going to
How
record.
old are they?
I think they're in their 90s.
Yeah.
And I'm going to record their stories. And what I'm hoping for is I want to find a female descendant that is now in the pheasant hunting industry. And I want to tie those two stories together. That's what it's all about. That's what the project's all about, is finding those cool, unknown stories that really speak to who we were, who we are, and what it means to us moving forward.
It's very clear in the films that you've put together so far that, you are tying people today back to their hunting past. And I think it's powerful.
Thank you, man.
I think it's powerful. I think you're doing a really good job. Where do you want to see this go?
The sky's the limit.
Yeah?
Yeah, the sky's the limit. Who knows? It's a passion project right now. But we got a bunch of good, cool stories lined up. Who knows? Who knows? I'll let the Lord decide what happens to the project. But I think, just, again, the reception that we've received has been overwhelming and humbling at the same time. You only met me yesterday, and here I am on the Gritty Bowmen podcast. I'm humbled to sit in this chair.
I was really, instantly, it was interesting. We met, and I'm like, and you're what? And what? 2 minutes in, I'm already looking it up on my iPhone, and I'm doing some checking, is this guy real? For real? Or is he talking?
Google stalk.
Yeah. So I stalked right in front of you. I stalked you. Okay. You seem, okay. Tell me more. But you don't know. I ask because I'm curious, what are your motives behind what you do?
2 simple motives. 2 very simple motives. One, we want to inspire that individual who used to hunt again. To inspire that individual who's been thinking about hunting to hunt. Inspire that age group, and really this is a passion, is that age group of you and me who have young kids to invest in their kids, because then you're replacing yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's number 1. That is the goal mission, right? And so if our episode, my episode, your episode in the future, Joanna's episode, somebody watches that and goes, wow, she did it. Well, I can do that. Mm-hmm. Then we're done. Project was a success. That's exactly what we're after. The second goal is probably just as important, but is what I said, is that it's reaching across the aisle to that non-hunting mainstream American to say, this is who we are. And the way that I see that is that I view the populace as a bell curve. We're going to have a segment on the left that is always hunters. Ingrained in you, grew up in it, it's family, you're going to hunt, it's what you do.
Yep.
And there's people on the right, and I've switched the right and left now, but anyway, that are always going to hate hunting. They're not going to like it, they're not going to be a part of it, they don't want anything to do with it, and they're going to scream and shout. Mm-hmm. Okay. But there's this middle piece where they're okay with hunting. They don't quite like some of it, but they're intrigued with other parts of it.
Correct.
And that is the demographic that we should be targeting. And there is people don't realize it, but we have mainstream hunting on mainstream American television today. You watch all of those shows on Nat Geo, Discovery, Arctic Life. I don't know what the show's names are, but
yeah.
The guy kills a moose on camera. Mm-hmm. You don't hear anybody screaming about that. Why? Because it's sustenance, it's survival, it's part of who they are, heritage, culture. Hey, light bulb.
Yep, absolutely. I'm hoping at some point, I had Donnie on the podcast, Donnie Vincent, and he's coming out he said 2 films this year. Mm-hmm. And what I like about Donnie's films is they pretty much resonate and connect with everyone. Yeah. Not just hunters, but the non-hunters as well. And if not more so. As much so. Mm-hmm. And I feel like more of that kind of content, which demonstrates just a deep appreciation that hunters have for the wild and wild places that is just overlooked.
And look, you're not going to, the content of hunting, kill shots, whatnots, never going to get rid of it. It's going to be a part of us. It's who we are. But I think just what you said, can we not build this other part of us, this other genuine content that has reverence, that has heritage, that has culture?
Yeah.
And that's why we started the project.
So the rest of your hunting story, you moved to Mississippi when you were how old?
24.
24. And where did you study?
University of Mississippi. Did a PhD in the University of Mississippi. Biology. I'm a wetland ecologist, but I've got a bunch of other fancy stuff behind me, but I won't bore people with that. And then I became a professor at Mississippi State University in the Wildlife, Fisheries, and Aquaculture Department. So I've got this conservation wildlife bend to me. Uh-huh. And then I was fortunate enough to know the right people. And as it is in this world, it's who you know. And I'd impressed the right people. And the BP oil spill happened. And they were standing up a new federal entity that was going to oversee the restoration framework from Texas to Florida. And they were looking for a chief scientist, and they looked at me. And so it was an amazing journey to do something at that scale, interacting with the people that I interacted with, and I just loved it. It was a career-defining piece of business for a scientist. And getting close to the end of my tenure of that job, the contractor that works in Mississippi helping implement restoration said, hey, we'd like you to do the same job for Mississippi as you just did for the Gulf. That's what I do today. Wow. Day in and day out, and I love it. It's the conservation restoration science side of me. That's married up against this.
We could talk for hours about that stuff, too.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff happening, man. It's the biggest ecological restoration project on the planet. The Gulf, right now. In terms of the money being implemented there. Oh, there's some cool stuff. Big oyster reefs going in place, living shorelines, real large, massive conservation projects. Yeah.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, it's some good stuff.
So when did you start hunting then?
Literally 3 years after I got in the States. About 2006. I'd met a guy. If you follow when everybody listening to this goes and follows our Instagram page.
Yeah.
There's a post there that I literally just killed my first buck 3 weeks ago. And I've been hunting 11 years in Mississippi.
Like whitetail buck.
Uh-huh. But I've been because I'm in the wildlife game, I know what I'm looking for. I've been looking for a mature animal.
Yeah.
And this guy, the first hunt I ever went on was with this guy, Landon Lee. He's 6'5", 260-pound just monster of a man,
Yeah.
I didn't understand him because he had a deep southern drawl, and he didn't understand me because my South African accent was really heavy. But we got on like a house on fire, and he said, look, we're going to go hunting. I was like, all right. So I went to Walmart and bought bibs, just the typical classic, Mississippi hunting. He gave me a lawn chair, stuck me under a tree, gave me a semi-auto 308, and he said, slide it forward when you get in the stand and just be still. Literally, that's what he told me, right? So I'm sitting in a lawn chair. I swear I'm not making up stuff here.
Oh, I believe it. You're in Mississippi.
Didn't see anything. I walk out at like 9 o'clock on a road. 30 yards from me, out steps a buck. First hunt. I'm like, lift up the gun, start it in, pull the trigger, click. Buck looks at me, runs off. I'm like furious, right? I walk up there and I said, Len, this gun that you gave me is broken. I had the buck, it was going to click. He's like, what are you talking about? Racks the bullet. I was like, he's like, what did you do? I said, I eased it forward like you told me to ease it forward. He said, oh, because you probably just left like a little millimeter space between the bullet and but that set me on again, if I'd killed that first morning, again, I wouldn't have had the appreciation for what that buck meant to me 3 weeks ago. Yeah. And I called Landon on the Instagram post and I said, thanks to you to start it off for me. So now I like my wife. My wife has a PhD in 18th century Gothic literature, which is we can leave that for another. Yeah.
I wonder what the conversations are like at your house.
We'll leave that for another day. But she says people will ask her like, does Robbie hunt? And she's like, I'll couch it like this. If there was a season for babies, Robbie would be hunting babies. Because I want to experience it all because I never got to experience it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's a lot of adult onset hunters.
Exactly.
In coming into the community now.
Yep.
And they're coming at it from not a childhood or an upbringing around it. And so it's completely for them. It's, they've been brought to it maybe because they listened to Joe Rogan or Ranella or, something.
Right.
And they're like, so-and-so does it. I kind of want to try this, maybe
Exactly.
Tim Ferriss or whatever. And they hear some mainstream person that they very much relate to, go out and hunt. And then they say, I want to see what that's like. Mm-hmm. And so they come at it from a whole different viewpoint. Mm-hmm. And then they get out there and they do it. And I think a lot of them are, they experience it and it becomes part of something they're like, well, I have lost time to make up for now. Like they don't take it for granted. Mm-hmm. They don't take it for granted. Mm-hmm. They know that they just are really grateful for what's there that they didn't know was there. That's something that was missing.
But you touched on it. It's the mainstreamers now that all of a sudden people are like, oh, hey, you're a hunter. James Hetfield, lead singer of Metallica. Oh, you're a hunter?
Yeah. Zuckerberg.
I think Cam Haynes posted something the other day of Mario Lopez hunting.
Well, yeah. And Eastwood.
Rob Eastwood, right? Is it Rob? Clint Eastwood's son.
Yes.
Yeah, big hunter.
It's pretty neat to see people coming on at this stage and having huge spheres of influence, mm-hmm. and then being able to tell our story mm-hmm. and go, no, hunting's not this that you think it is. It's this.
That's right.
And I think I like Shane said, I'm very much encouraged by it all and very, very excited to see what the future holds for hunters.
Yeah,
it's and conservation. It's sad when you see something like the band Grizzly Bear Band in British Columbia and how that's come about, and I get hate and stuff on Instagram and social media platforms or YouTube where that anti-hunting segment mm-hmm. of the country comes forward and really attacks what mm-hmm. I do. Mm-hmm. I saw a CNN post the other day, and it was very mixed. It was, the title was something in regards to trophy hunting, or hunting is not conservation. Mm-hmm. And it was a big, long, and then there was some film backing it up that actually
showed the opposite.
Yeah. And the whole article was confusing because I couldn't walk away. It was like they took two drastically different opinions and stuck them together and compared the two. I know they need to get ratings and and suck people into watching or listening, but then I haven't actually. I'm going to sit down and watch Trophy, which I haven't seen yet. It's like a documentary that was recently done, and I've seen it on Instagram. I've been reached out by a lot of people who asked me to watch it and talk about it. Have you seen it?
I have not, but I've seen some of the posts. Some of the quoted pictures and whatnots.
And most hunters, I think, were encouraged by what they saw, especially because one of the quotes, the leading headlines for the advertisement was, and I think it was CNN executives or producers said, "We really, really wanted to make hunting look bad."
And what we realized was it wasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
That's first, it's powerful to admit, like you're not exactly going in there with some journalistic purity there, like just unbiased attitude, right? You have an agenda before you start. But then to get in there and then realize the truth of it all is I think it's so nice because it's powerful and it's real what hunting does, how conservation works, and for an entity to, have an agenda to make hunting look bad before they even have done their journalism. It comes with a preconceived notion of what it is. But to have the character to get in there and then change your preconceived, change your agenda. So I have a tremendous respect for, because it's not easy for people to change their mind on things where they really have a strong opinion of going into.
Yeah.
So that was encouraging, because if that's the case, then there's a good chance that the tide is changing in the right direction.
Absolutely.
So, Robbie, appreciate you coming on, man.
Man, I'm humbled.
I really do. I want to talk. I'm going to read this book.
So I'll tell you what we're going to do next.
Yes.
You're going to read that book.
Mm-hmm.
And what we'll do is we'll just do like, you're going to pick a story.
Okay.
And I'll set the scene. And we literally can just dive into the story. And because there's the variety of stories. It'll be cool, because it'll be like, what? They're talking about Cape buffaloes? Or they're talking about a hippo turning over a boat after a duck hunting expedition up a river in Mozambique. Stories that like people are like,
yeah.
What?
Yes. I'll read the book, and then we need to get back together and pursue this further and talk more about blood origins. So where can people connect with you?
Anything Blood Origins. So at Blood Origins on Instagram, at Blood Origins on Facebook, bloodorigins.com.
What's the YouTube channel?
Blood Origins.
That's it. I'm surprised that was all free and not already taken.
Well, there's a story behind it. We actually weren't called Blood Origins to start with.
Oh, really?
We were called In the Blood.
Okay.
And there's too much other stuff that's in the blood something. Yeah. And honestly, once I landed on Blood Origin, it fits so much better.
Yeah.
About like our origins of where we come from and essentially what is buried inside of us in our DNA. And if you look at our logo, it's a DNA helix with a family tree that comes out of that DNA helix, and the blood is spelled in a bullet. It's
very cool.
Yeah, it's a cool logo.
So I encourage everyone that's listening to go out and watch Robbie's films, Blood Origins. I've watched 2.5. I got to finish the rest of them, and each one's unique. Share them with your non-hunting friends.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're a great. They're great for that, And if you like what you see and what you're hearing, let Robbie know, and follow him on Instagram.
Yep. Lots more stories coming. We've got a pile of stories coming, and they're awesome. They're awesome.
Well, good. I'm glad you're getting support, and I'm glad. I really am. You could tell motives are a big deal to me. Why someone does what they do. So it's not difficult for me to understand why non-hunters are okay with someone killing a bear and absolutely appalled by another person that kills a bear. Mm-hmm. Because motives are what, it's not the act of killing a bear that's the issue.
It's why.
It's why you do it.
Yep.
And that's the same for everything. Because at the end of the day, human beings are moral creatures.
That's right.
It's how we're built. And morality matters to us. And if the reason that you kill an animal is wrong, people know it.
Mm-hmm. They can see right through it.
And if the reason you do it is different, is good, perceived as good, then the reaction, the knee-jerk reaction to oppose it is not there. Mm-hmm. It actually embraces it. Mm-hmm. So when I ask you what your motives are, and you describe your two motives, and we kind of boil it down to those one-dimensional issues. I'm sure there's a million motives for it, but in general, those are the kind of things that I wish more of us embraced, more in the hunting world embraced. And I think if we do and we move forward in that direction, that we'll continue, because I do believe we are making a lot of progress.
I agree.
And I think we'll continue to make a big difference.
Sure, man.
In the world.
Just pile it on our shoulders. We'll run. Be the spear.
Thanks, Robbie.
Thanks,
I appreciate it.
Much appreciated.
Stay gritty.
Yeah, buddy.
Despite our ever-changing, ever-indignant world with its growing ignorance of and indifference to the ways of the wild, I remain a predator, pitying those who revel in artificiality and synthetic success while regarding me and my kind as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood. I stalk a real world of dark wood and tall grass stirred by a restless wind blowing across sunlit water and beneath star-strewn sky. And on those occasions when I choose to kill, to claim some small part of nature's bounty for my own, I do so by choice, quickly, with the learned efficiency of a skilled hunter. Further, in my heart and mind, I know the truth and make no apologies for my actions or my place in time. Others around me may opt to eat only plants, nuts, and fruits. Still others may employ faceless strangers to procure their meats, their leather, their feathers, and all those niceties and necessities of life. Such is their right, of course, and I wish them well. All I ask in return is no one begrudge me, and all of us who may answer the primordial stirrings within our hunter souls, my right to do some of these things myself.
What you just heard is a quote from M.R. James. We truly live in a world that is largely ignorant and indifferent to the ways of the wild. And although some regard us as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood, we have the opportunity to change the way these people view the hunter and the hunt. We can share our experiences and nature's bounty with those who employ these faceless strangers. And by so doing, we make a difference, not just for ourselves, but for the wild animals in the wild places we care so deeply about. Never stop sharing your passion for hunting and the outdoors. Our wild animals and our wild places depend on it.
This is Ty Stubblefield, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowmen.
Gritty Bowmen.